Access to capital can make or break success, but sometimes, the real story lies in power and relationships. In a stunning move, Pastor T.D. Jakes has just passed the mantle of America's largest church to his daughter, a woman who defied the odds after becoming a mother at just 14. But that's not the headline shaking the nation. Explosive court documents from a producer suing Diddy have dropped Jakes' name right in the middle of a growing storm, and the world is watching. Then, in a shocking twist, a man from the 1980s stepped out of the shadows with serious accusations, threatening to tarnish a legacy decades in the making. Jakes didn't back down. He struck back with his own lawsuit, igniting a legal firestorm that began pulling in names, headlines, and billion-dollar deals. Add to that his terrifying near-death experience on live television, and it's clear something far bigger is unfolding at the Potter's house, something that could reshape everything we thought we knew. But before the fame, the power, and the controversy, there was just Thomas Dexter Jakes, a boy born on June 9, 1957, in South Charleston, West Virginia. His father, Ernest Jakes Sr., kept the family afloat with a modest janitorial business, while his mother, Odith, dedicated her life to teaching. They worked tirelessly, yet life was far from easy. Growing up as the youngest of three in a poor black neighborhood, Thomas knew the harsh realities of racism and daily struggle from an early age. Money was scarce, opportunities were rare, and the world around him seemed built to keep him down, but those early battles would forge the resilience that would one day carry him to the heights of power and influence. Under the weight of life's challenges, something unshakable was taking shape within him. His parents drilled into him the values of hard work, self-belief, and an unbreakable spirit, lessons that would define his future. As a boy, Thomas faced a lisp so severe that most believed he'd never stand behind a pulpit. But he had already decided that preaching was his calling. In the quiet of his bedroom, he delivered fiery sermons to rows of stuffed animals, and in the stillness of the backyard, he preached to the trees as if they were a congregation. The spark was already burning bright, even if few could see it. Classmates mocked him, adults dismissed him, and the nickname, Bible Boy, followed him everywhere. But rather than breaking him, it fueled his determination. Every single day, he practiced, mimicking the passion of the preachers he admired and tirelessly working to master his speech. While others saw a boy with a speech impediment, he saw a future where his voice would command thousands. What they didn't know was that the very thing they ridiculed would one day become the force that moved nations. From the very start, Thomas wasn't content with simply speaking, he wanted his words to reach deep into people's hearts and stir something real. That fire inside him became his shield against the world. But at just 10 years old, his world was shaken when his father was diagnosed with kidney failure, a slow, merciless illness that robbed the family of hope bit by bit. In those days, treatment was scarce, and for a black family in West Virginia, the obstacles were even greater. His father's strength faded before his eyes, and Thomas, still just a boy, was forced to step into the role of a man far too soon. While other kids his age played and went to school without a care, Thomas was doing chores, looking after his siblings, and helping his mother care for the man who had once been his protector. He missed classes, sacrificed his own childhood, and carried a weight no child should ever have to bear, yet never once did he complain. Day after day, he watched his father's life slowly slip away, an experience that carved an unshakable truth into his heart: life is fleeting, and family is everything. It was a lesson born of pain, one that would shape the man he would become forever. The pain worsened 3 years later. Thomas's father passed away in 1973 while he was only 16 years old. The family was inconsolable. Everything fell apart, financially and emotionally. In order to assist, Thomas had been working part-time at the Union Carbide plant, but he now needed to take on more. He worked at any job he could find, as did his brother. On certain days, they were unsure of how they would eat. However, Thomas continued to preach despite the gloom. Just his voice, his faith, and his fire, no money, little churches, and small crowds. He became a man before he was ready since he lost his father. However, it also brought him nearer to his purpose. Thomas delivered his first actual sermon in 1976 when he was just 19 years old. He was formally ordained in 1979. For a young man who had experienced so much, it was a significant step. Although the lisp persisted, it was no longer an issue. Because he seemed to have lived every word he uttered, people paid attention. He wasn't merely quoting the Bible. He was gushing blood. He preached anywhere he could at night while working ordinary jobs during the day. Although the groundwork had been established, his life did not yet appear to be a success tale. There was more to come. That in 1981, something began to take shape. In Beckley, West Virginia, Thomas received an invitation to speak at a church revival. He met Sarita and Jameson there. Her birthday is August 19, 1955. She was intelligent, well-liked, and already involved in ministry. However, she had a painful background. In front of his kids, her brother had been killed. She has experienced violence in past relationships. Nevertheless, she came to hear Thomas's sermon. Something clicked that evening. He drew her in. People stated they were smitten. They began to converse. After 6 months, they tied the knot. Quick, unvarnished, and authentic. It was more than just love. It was fate. They had a difficult marriage. Not at all. At first, they had no money. While Thomas preached during the day, Sarita worked as a Christian radio DJ at night. Despite their lack of wealth, they were full of dreams. Then, after only 6 months, catastrophe struck. Sarita's feet and legs were crushed in an automobile accident. Doctors doubted she would ever be able to walk again. Thomas, however, would not allow her to quit up. All over again, he taught her how to walk. Together, slowly, painfully. Their marriage became unbreakable at that time. Sarita developed into more than just a wife over time. She joined the ministry as a partner, publishing her own books and directing women's groups. Jakes founded his first church, Temple of Faith Church, in Montgomery, West Virginia, in 1980 when he was just 23 years old. 10 people were involved. That's all. Just belief, no money, no fame. A storefront was rented by them. The winters were cold, and the summers were torrid. Bills were piling up. They occasionally gathered empty bottles solely to purchase food. However, from Montgomery to Smithers to South Charleston to Cross Lanes and finally to Dallas, Texas, the word continued to spread. The Potter's House began with 10 individuals. One of the largest churches in America, with over 30,000 members. Because he didn't give up. Thomas continued to work while constructing that first church. At the Union Carbide chemical plant, he put in his time. Hazardous labor. Long hours, fumes from mining, welding chemicals, and then straight to the pulpit. Just hustle, no breaks or leisure. The factory closed in 1982. Jake was laid off. The situation worsened. For $100 each day, he dug ditches for his brother. Not always able to pay the expenses. They occasionally had to decide between electricity and water. One banknote at a time, he and Sarita alternated. They used the family's bottles when there was no water. They utilized candles in the absence of light. However, the sermons continued. T.D. Jake took over a little church in Smithers, West Virginia, in 1982 when he was barely 25 years old. With barely 10 members, enough to occupy a single car, it was known as the Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith. That would have seemed like a dead end to most people. Jake, however, noticed something else. He had nearly nothing, as did his wife, Sarita. Therefore, through writing, books, and prayer. To keep their lights on, she even worked late hours as a Christian radio DJ. But Jake continued to preach with all his might. He was known as Bible Youngster as a youngster because he preached to made-up crowds. He was now preaching to actual souls in need of hope. The church was located in a cold, suffering community. Jake, however, ignored the poverty. He saw possibilities. He hosted his first church conference in 1983. The title was, Back to the Bible. There were 80 persons. That was 8 times the church's original size. The first concrete indication that his message could go well beyond Smithers was this. Jake made a bold move that same year. He started a new show called Back to the Bible and paid $45 for a 30-minute radio slot. It was a significant risk. He believed in the power of the airwaves, even though his church could not afford it. His voice began to spread to desolate houses, chilly towns, and locations where no preacher had yet visited. He immediately struck a chord with the audience. His statements were strong and empathetic. The man who used to preach to 10 people was suddenly being heard by hundreds. Everything changed because of that tiny radio show. He became a local celebrity as a result, and people eagerly anticipated hearing his voice each week. It also prepared the ground for the following step. Jake realized in 1988 that he had to go beyond his storefront church. At that point, he became a member of Higher Ground, Always Abounding Assemblies, a Pentecostal denomination. Bishop Sherman Watkins, who soon became Jake's father figure and mentor, served as its leader. Watkins had only 11 employees at the beginning. Something about Jake reminded him of his own path. Jake gained more than just a title by joining this organization. It provided him with more resources, a larger audience, and more resounding support. Their message was precisely the same as his: ordinary people might serve an exceptional God. Jake was no longer working alone thanks to this new connection. He had a road to something greater, a network, and a leader. Then the motion started. Jake moved his church to South Charleston, West Virginia, in 1990 from Smithers. Although it was a smaller city, it was far bigger than the one he began in. The group grew from about 100 members to more than 300. Jake didn't advocate for superficial ease. He addressed the forgotten, the addicted, and the hurting. By 1993, he took yet another risk. Let's change lanes now. A middle-class suburb that is primarily white. The presence of a black Pentecostal minister in such a place was unprecedented. However, it was successful. 40% of the more than 2,100 members of his congregation were Caucasian. It was unusual, even startling. However, it demonstrated that Jake could transcend racial and social divides without diluting his message. Prior to these actions, Jake had already made a significant shift in 1987. He was ordained into the bishop's office at the age of 30. Officially, it was. He was touched by Dr. Quander L. Wilson at the Charleston Civic Center. He received more than simply a new title at the occasion. He gained respect, authority, and the capacity to manage more congregations as a result. His perseverance and desire had proven him. The church now recognized it with authority and status. Everything altered once more in 1993. Jake started broadcasting on the Trinity Broadcasting Network once a week. The Potter's Touch was the name of it. His sermons were no longer confined to a room. Millions of homes had it. His message started to spread throughout the nation and perhaps the world. He spoke in a straightforward, passionate, vivacious, and honest manner. In order to keep up with the boom, he relocated to Dallas, Texas, just 3 years later. His show was broadcast in more than 100 countries by that point. This was no longer only a ministry. There was a movement. He took yet another calculated risk in 1994. He collaborated with BET, or Black Entertainment Television. Black audiences, who hardly ever saw religious leaders like him on mainstream television, were directly reached by this. He did more than merely preach. He customized them. He discussed topics including everyday survival, healing, fatherhood, money, and dignity. Millions of people in the U.S., the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe received these messages. His voice instantly captured the attention of people who had never been inside a church. He established the Manpower Conference, a forum exclusively for men, in the same year. Detroit hosted the first one. There were thousands. It was vulnerable, honest, and unvarnished. Jake reassured guys that it was acceptable to experience pain, to cry, and to recover. The meeting continued to expand. In 2011, a Dallas event drew almost 9,000 guys. Since the start, more than 150,000 guys had arrived. A few arrived by plane from Italy. His voice carried that far. Jake took another chance in 1995. TDJ Enterprises was founded by him. It was more than just a company. A vision came to mind. He used it to release music records, produce movies, and publish books. Woman, Thou Art Loose, his debut feature film, was a box office success in 2004. Then followed Heaven is for Real in 2014 and Jumping the Broom in 2011. Over 20 million copies of his books have been sold globally. Black Enterprise claims that TDJ Enterprises generated close to $400 million in revenue. He was no longer merely a preacher. He was powerful, a producer, and a publisher. In Dallas, he even established a school and built a housing project worth $150 million. Jake hosted a program called Get Ready from 1995 to 1996. It was broadcast on television and radio. It included live calls, music, interviews, and preaching. It was broadcast on BET, TBN, and syndicated. As a result, it was among the most widely viewed religious broadcasts. Millions of people watched. The subjects were authentic. Jake never held back when it came to addiction, domestic abuse, financial difficulties, and destroyed homes. He was not merely a preacher. He spoke to those who were hurting. He gave hope. He provided them with motivation to continue. Few pastors have ever ventured to do what T.D. Jakes did in 1996. He relocated to Dallas, Texas, leaving behind his expanding congregation in a little hamlet in West Virginia. He wasn't by himself. 50 employees and their families accompanied him. It was more than a simple move. It was a mission. He constructed a huge structure on a mountaintop that was 34 acres in size. Potter's House. He aspired for tens of thousands of members in Dallas, compared to his previous congregation of about 1,000. The new site expanded quickly and included offices, a 5,000-seat auditorium, and space for expansion. By 2000, they had constructed a brand new sanctuary that was 191,000 square feet, could accommodate 7,600 people, and was equipped with the newest technology. They only needed 4 years to pay it off. The momentum gained speed like that. Something significant seemed to be happening even at the Potter's House's very first service. There were more than 2,000 attendees. They arrived in a brand new city and a brand new church. In just a few years, they were hosting 3 Sunday services. Over 23,000 individuals were attending each week by August 2000. What began as an act of faith had evolved into a phenomenon. Not only did the Potter's House expand, it flourished. Over 30,000 members joined. It was named one of the largest churches in the nation by Outreach magazine. With more than 16,000 monthly attendees, CBS News ranked it as the 25th largest megachurch in America in 2018. Online viewership reached 70,000 for special events. The place was more than a church. It developed into a movement. The people were what made it unique. The congregation was almost all male. It was an odd figure for a church, particularly one with a predominantly minority membership, but that was the goal. The Potter's House was not like the others. People from all walks of life came together because of it. The working-class families, professionals, the homeless, and those who have served time in prison. Jake made it obvious that everyone was welcome. Tens of thousands of men started attending his Manpower conferences. His message transcended gender, class, and color. Hurricane Katrina followed. In 2005, millions of people lost their houses and more than 1,800 people perished. Jake didn't watch from a distance. Alongside President George W. Bush, he traveled to Louisiana. Bush officially thanked Jake on September 5 for his assistance in mobilizing what he referred to as the Army of Compassion. Jake asked the president to take a more direct approach to addressing poverty. He was no longer only preaching. The White House was receiving his advice. Jake was also present on January 20, 2009, when Barack Obama took the oath of office. He went to St. John's Episcopal Church that morning to pray in private with a select group of leaders. The moment was silent but impactful. He joined Joel Hunter and other religious leaders in their prayers for America's first black president. He was more than just a pastor that day. He represented the pinnacle of spiritual leadership. Jake, however, didn't end at the pulpit. The Metroplex Economic Development Corporation was established by him in 1998. It provided hope to underserved communities, mentored youth, and assisted families in purchasing homes. Additionally, he established the Clay Academy, which promoted education and community development. For those who had been left behind, these were more than just programs, they were lifelines. Jake felt that action should follow faith. Then came television. He joined forces with Dr. Phil will start a syndicated chat show with CBS. There were huge hopes and big names engaged. However, the show never came to screen. The project collapsed due to the unstable economy. Jake made another attempt in 2015, but most people would have stopped there. The TD Jake program debuted in 4 places this time before reaching 50 markets. It included self-help, celebrity interviews, and motivation. However, it was cancelled by March 2017. The ratings were poor. Nevertheless, it was taken up by Oprah Winfrey's network, which provided him with a fresh platform to spread his message. His family was developing into its own ministry during this time. Thomas Jr., Jamar, Jermaine, Cora, and Sarah were the 5 children he and his wife Sarita reared. They are all engaged in ministry. It's not common. It's not something that most megachurch pastors can say. Cora and Sarah went on to become well-known writers and preachers. The others are employed in media and operations. They weren't merely doing what their father said. In the same mission, they were constructing their own routes. Sarah's tale had a lot of impact. Her birthday is July 17, 1988. She became a mother at the age of 14. Her future might have been over. It became her message instead. She started writing after her marriage ended and she was left to raise her son alone. People were moved by her candor. She wed Pastor Tay Roberts in 2014. These days, they co-pastor congregations in Denver and Los Angeles. Sarah and Tay were appointed the new Potter's House leaders in Dallas in April 2025. Her journey from teenage mother to megachurch leader is a tale of metamorphosis. Then there's Cora. Her goal of having a son named Nehemiah began at an early age. Nearly 5 million women in the United States suffer from polycystic ovarian syndrome, which she was diagnosed with at the age of 22. She might never have children, according to doctors. It was heartbreaking. Despite going into depression, she persisted. To help other women like herself, she started a blog called Fertility Faith. She went on to become a preacher and is currently in charge of the children's ministry at the Dallas Potter's House. She still hopes to hold Nehemiah in her arms, and she adopted a daughter named Amore. She sought meaning in suffering. Unexpectedly, the worlds of finance and religion converged on April 27, 2023. Expectations and eyebrows were aroused by the partnership between Wells Fargo and Pastor T.D. Jakes. A huge 10-year partnership that could invest up to $1 billion in America's most underserved communities was unveiled. This was no temporary charitable commitment. The commitment was long-term. $1 billion in investments, grants, and loans with the goal of improving lives in areas that are typically overlooked by large banks. Jake carried his entire empire with him, not just his name. The T.D. Jake Foundation, TDJ Enterprises, and TD Jake Real Estate Ventures. Charlie Scharf, the CEO of Wells Fargo, also didn't hold back. "This wasn't a one-time investment," he remarked. "Together, we were to create lasting effect and true equity. Not all they were doing was writing checks. The rules were being revised." Then, in 2024 and 2025, that billion-dollar pledge began to materialize. With support from Wells Fargo, the T.D. Jake Foundation awarded $18 million in awards to 29 organizations nationwide. 16 organizations specializing on career development, affordable housing, and financial literacy received the first $9 million. In April 2025, the next $9 million was revealed, helping 13 further organizations. This round focused on workforce preparedness and economic empowerment. Some of the grants were enormous. Paul Quinn College, Morehouse College, and WI University each received $1.5 million. They utilized it for mental health services, school upgrades, and new housing. $500,000 was given to the Lightship Foundation to support entrepreneurs. The same sum was given to the Power 52 Foundation for renewable energy education. Additionally, United Mega raised $500,000 to combat food insecurity. These weren't merely gifts. Their investments in transformation were specifically targeted. The foundation's CEO, Kelly Cornish, put it best. "This was more than merely carrying out the mission. It was a fearless protest for chance." However, Jake's name was drawn into controversy by another type of article just as the media were lauding him for his community service. In early 2024, a federal lawsuit regarding Shah Diddy Combs exploded in the media. The Healthy filed by means of producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones made extreme crook allegations against Combs, sexual harassment, drugs, or even intercourse trafficking. Jake's changed into in no way accused of wrongdoing, however his call got here up. The lawsuit claimed Combs deliberate to apply his reference to Jake to easy up his public picture after being sued by Cassie Ventura for rape and abuse. Jake's call appeared handiest once, but that changed into enough. The press ran wild. Online theories erupted. Human beings wanted to know what changed into the real connection. Despite the fact that Jake had no formal involvement inside the case, the mere point out prompted a stir that would not leave. Then things got even messier. In October 2024, Pastor Dwayne Youngblood, a convicted intercourse perpetrator, went on a YouTube talk display and accused Jake of looking to sexually attack him returned in the 1980s. He stated it occurred whilst he became 18 or 19. Consistent with Youngblooded, Jake tried to kiss him and hugged him in a manner he did not want. Those claims hit the internet like a lightning strike. Youngblooded additionally dispatched Jake a letter through his attorney traumatic $6 million or he'd record a lawsuit. Jake's criminal crew replied rapid. They called it extortion. They stated Youngblooded, who had been convicted twice, once in 2008 and again in 2014 for crimes regarding minors, become just trying to restore his very own shattered call. They referred to as the accusations fake, calculated, and malicious. A month later, Jake struck back. On November 25, 2024, he filed a defamation lawsuit in federal court docket. It wasn't just against Youngblooded, however also others who might also have helped spread the lies. The submitting accused Youngblooded of launching a coordinated smear campaign. Jake said the assaults had taken a toll bodily, emotionally, and spiritually. In fact, just one day earlier than submitting the lawsuit, something terrifying came about. On November 24, 2024, even as preaching stay at the Potter's residence in Dallas, Bishop T.D. Jakes collapsed mid-sermon. Thousands have been watching in character. Lots greater were looking online. As he neared the stop of an hour-lengthy message, he began to shake. His hand dropped the microphone. He slumped onto a stool after which keeled over. It looked like exhaustion before everything, however it wasn't. Jake had suffered a massive coronary heart assault live on digital camera. The pictures went viral. Church individuals rushed to help. Paramedics had been known as Visitors from round the arena watched the chaos unfold in actual time. Later, medical doctors advised Jake he had come dangerously near loss of life. Consistent with them, he became just 5 minutes from demise. 5 minutes. If he had arrived on the health facility any later, he wouldn't have made it. The clot had blocked blood to the right aspect of his coronary heart. Half his heart had stopped running. The simplest aspect maintaining him going for the duration of the sermon became adrenaline. As soon as he sat down, his frame gave out. He turned into actually preaching with handiest half of a coronary heart running. What befell next changed him forever. Jake defined a near loss of life revel in. He stated he felt like he left his body. He saw white clouds, silence, peace. I used to be on my manor out, he stated. The sector around him changed into chaos, but in that moment, he felt completely calm. He later known as the enjoy a privilege, a spiritual second that gave him readability approximately what mattered most. That moment driven him to make a main selection. On April 27, 2025, in front of his whole congregation, Jake made it reliable. He introduced that his daughter Sarah Jakes Roberts and her husband Tay Roberts could be taking on as senior pastors. The Potter's House wasn't simply any church. It became a global powerhouse with over 30,000 participants and tens of millions greater watching online. Now, it turned into coming into a brand new generation. Jakes made it clean this wasn't retirement. This is not a departure. It's a rebirth. He stated he would not be stepping far from the pulpit entirely. He'd still pontificate, still lead, nevertheless manual. However, the daily leadership might now relaxation with Sarah and Tay. He called it a diffusion, no longer an exit. The transition have been years inside the making. In 2022, Sarah and Tay moved from Los Angeles to Dallas. Via 2023, they were assistant pastors getting ready for this exact moment. Sarah had already constructed her own motion, Female Evolve, that specialize in empowering women round the arena. And now the torch become being handed. This type of transition is uncommon in megachurches. Commonly adjustments come suddenly or after controversy, but Jake's deliberate every element. It was transparent. It turned into planned. And it became deeply emotional.